This episode of Watercolor Florals is all about one of my favorite local wildflowers, the lupin. We are going to sketch this flower and then paint it, so let's get started. Hi guys, welcome back. My name is Shada Campbell. As most of you know, Chris and I live in Prince Edward Island, Canada, and in PEI we are known for our wild lupins. They grow in the roadsides and ditches in the month of June, and they are gorgeous. So today we are going to pick some lupins and then we'll sketch them, and then we'll head back to the studio and do a watercolor painting. I want to introduce you to my island. For anyone who hasn't had the chance to visit Prince Edward Island, it is a truly magical place, especially in the summer, and it was such a pleasure for me to get outside and sketch, and I wanted to really share that with you. It's such a wonderful thing to go and be with your subject in nature. If you love drawing flowers, there's nothing better than getting out there. And it doesn't mean you have to do the whole painting outside. You can head back to your studio where you're comfortable, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. I'm going to take these drawings, go back into the studio, and we'll work together to create a beautiful watercolor painting. So here's my sketch that I prepped out in the field. I've got 3 lupins. I like to do things in odd numbers. It always looks nice. I'm going to trace over this now using just a piece of tracing paper and my Pigma Micron artist pen. And tracing allows me to just simply refine my drawing. That way when I'm sketching, I don't need to worry about getting it perfect, because I know that I can bring my sketchbook back to the studio, and at that point I can do a trace. And not only will the trace help me to refine everything, it will also help me to transfer the image onto the watercolor paper. So it's a great sort of dualistic step that really helps the entire process. I'm just making sure that I capture the shape of each lupin and each leaf. I'm not focusing on detail because I don't want to transfer a lot of detail to my watercolor paper. If your trace gets a little messy, you can always do a second trace. I'm good with that one. So let's talk supplies. I'm using a Canson watercolor block, 9x12 cold pressed paper. That means it's kind of already stretched because all the paper is glued together. And I've got 2 glasses of clean water, some paper for blotting, various synthetic round brushes, and then I have my koi set from Sakura. So let's talk about how we're going to transfer this image. I have traced my sketch in very low detail, and now what I'll do is I'll tape it onto the watercolor paper using a little bit of washi tape, and then I'm going to use graphite transfer paper to transfer that very basic image. So let's tape that in place right where we want it, and then we're going to put the graphite transfer paper dark side down. I'll link all of these supplies in the video description below, so don't worry if you're not sure what something is. There will be an Amazon link there. And I'm just tracing this very faintly. I don't want to transfer a ton of detail to the watercolor paper because, as you know, watercolors are so wonderfully light and translucent, so I don't want to have a very dark pencil or graphite lines showing through my painting. So let's lift that up now that we've traced over everything with our sharp pencil, and you can see I've got this nice faint outline. It's just enough to guide me through my painting, and it's light enough that we won't see it when the painting is all done. With our trace done, we are going to focus on mixing up the colors that we'll use for the entire painting. So of course the lupins are pink and purple, so I'm mixing up different shades of pink and purple so that I can grab from the different colors as I work through the painting. Now, something I want to talk about is color selection. You can see I've got some different colors here. At first, I mixed up pink and purple, the ones along the top, and they were quite bright. And then I started to think, I need to be a little more thoughtful about this. I don't want to use the paints directly out of the set. And so I started mixing more brown and peach into my pink and purple. And what I ended up with was a color palette that I was much happier with. You can see these pinks and purples along the bottom of this card are much more muted, they're warmer, and they're more sophisticated, and they're just right for the piece that I want to create. So before you begin, take that 10 minutes and think about your colors. Do you like warm or cool? Do you like muted or bright? Now what I'm doing is I'm taking that muted green that I mixed up, and I am starting with the stem down the center, but very, very light. And then I'm going to do this top part of the lupin where all of the little blossoms or petals are sort of come together in a tight cone shape, and they're still very green. So what I'm doing is I'm laying down that first layer of little green, small oval shaped strokes, and then I'll leave that alone, and I'm taking the same brush here and I'm using a very light pink to make some larger oval strokes, but also to mix in a little bit of pink into the green to give it a very natural look. This is going to be a very loose lupin painting. I'm not going for a ton of detail. I just want to capture sort of the conical shape and these little oval shaped petals that it has, or blossoms, but I'm also going to mix them together a little bit and let it become slightly abstracted, as I usually do. So you can see with the second one here, I've started with tiny strokes in light green, and then I'll go back in with pink or purple, and I allow my brush strokes to get a little bit larger as the petals get larger, and I also want to blend that purple into the green ever so slightly. I want to capture just enough of the real lupin, but still abstract it slightly. And you can see when we look at them that they are tight and green and conical at the top, and they get larger and brighter in color towards the bottom, and much fuller too. So that's exactly what I'm doing here, just filling in the larger petals at the bottom, allowing them to bleed together, making some of them darker, making some of them a little lighter. Some of them have a very definite petal shape, others are all kind of bleeding together. And then where the flowers meet here, the pink and purple lupin, I'll actually grab a little bit of pink paint and sort of mix it with the purple so that I get a nice variation and a nice bleeding of color there, and it just looks nice and free and natural. And then I'll go back in and add a little more purple detailing to that green area. Just as it dries, you'll be able to actually add more detail. You've got more control when you're doing a wet on dry technique, painting on top of dry paint. And I'm finishing the third lupin here, and I'm going to do a pink lupin again, but a slightly different shade of pink. And it's just the same formula, starting with the small green petals, then doing some larger pink petals and letting them bleed into the green ever so slightly. I've got my stem in the middle, and for this stem, I actually did some smaller branches coming off of it, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But with the first layer of paint on the flowers done, I'm going to take a nice saturated, muted sort of pea green, and I'm going to start painting in these leaves. And because I've drawn the leaves and then transferred them, it makes painting them really fun because I know exactly where I want to place each leaf. And the lupins have these wonderful leaves that sort of fan out in a circular shape, and they are really fun to paint. You want to drag the belly of the brush across the page and then just use the tip of your paintbrush to add any little detail to the tip of each leaf or to create the stems. So you can see me doing that there, dragging the brush across the page, the belly of the brush, drag it, and then use the tip to add the detail. And we can make some of the leaves lighter and some darker just by adding water to the paint. Of course, you can make it more or less saturated, more or less opaque. So some of the leaves that I'm doing towards the back, I guess the back of the flowers, I am making them much lighter. And I think that brings a nice sort of design element to this piece. Next, I'll use the tip of my paintbrush to fill in the stems here, just doing some thin lines. They do not have to be perfectly straight. I like to make them sort of wide and then thin so that they look naturally imperfect. And then I'm using a tiny detail brush to add just a little bit of detail to the leaves. Just a simple line down the center can just bring a nice bit of detail to the piece. I'm not overthinking this at all, and not every leaf needs a line. And then, now that the flowers have dried, I am going to take a little bit of darker pink and purple and add just that extra bit of color and definition to our lupins.
Basically, this is just a little bit further that you can take this piece. You do not have to do this step. I think the lupins already look really nice, but I just thought, oh, it will give it a bit more depth and detail if I add just a little bit of darker pink. And you can see me going and adding in those lines on top of the green, and then I'm doing just a bit of darker shading on each petal or blossom. So just adding a little bit of darker paint to the tops of some of those petals. And I'm just mixing up a nice dark purple here, a rich opaque purple, not too opaque, but semi-opaque. And I'll do that to the purple flower as well. So here you can see I'll just add a little bit of darker purple to the top of some of these petals, and I'll add a line to some of them, and then I might even bleed it out a little bit or smudge it, but I'm just trying to give the look of more detail to these lupins. Again, these are abstracted slightly, they're not overly detailed, but I want to hone in on some of the smaller details, and the petals do have sort of a lighter and darker color within each petal if you look at the lupins. So that's what I'm trying to capture here. You could be done with these. You certainly don't have to add these tiny details. I'm also adding in some little stems on this lupin because it has a little more negative space. I left some of the space open. Some of them do not have very tight petals. The petals are very loosely spaced. So that was the idea behind that one there. And I am very quickly coming to the end of this painting. My final step here is simply to take a slightly more saturated or more opaque green and paint on just one side of a few of the leaves. I'm not going to do all of them. I just want to make a couple of them pop. It will just add a little more definition and depth to the piece, and it looks kind of nice. I will just finish up those leaves and then we are all done. I really enjoyed going out and sketching these out in the wild. That was a lot of fun. You don't have to do the entire piece outside. It's nice if you can just get out there with your subject and enjoy the process, relax, and take in a little bit of the season. And then of course you can always snap a few photos, bring your sketch back to the studio, and you can do your painting where you're most comfortable. Thank you so much for watching this video. I had so much fun making it, and I really hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content like this, and I will see you soon with a new tutorial.